And inside Syria, state media reports that a rebel mortar attack on a school in the Damascus suburbs has killed 29 students and a teacher. It's the latest incident of collateral damage in the conflict that has allegedly claimed hundreds of lives in the past few days alone. The Syrian government maintains it's fighting terrorists, armed and controlled from abroad. Well, for more on what's happening in and around the war-torn country, I'm now joined live by political analyst Sukant Chandan. Sukant, NATO says that these missiles will act as a deterrent and they will de-escalate the conflict. So presumably a welcome move, this deployment of these missiles.
When has NATO ever been interested in the human rights of the people of the global south? Never. They've only been interested in domination and trauma, as we can see most profoundly and illustratively in relation to what they've done in Libya. So this is not in any way going to help the Turkish and especially the Syrian people. It's another step towards the final nail in the coffin, which the NATO hopes is the regime change against Syria. Now, we just had the conflict in Gaza, and I've been saying for a good part of 2 years that the resistance in Gaza has realized that it wants to have an open battle of war of liberation with the Zionist state and their Western backers to refocus this whole essentially pro-NATO in its policies Arab Spring, or should I call it the NATO Arab Sting in the region. And with the resistance in Gaza that we saw just a few days ago, that's exactly what happened. Everything was starting to be exposed. Morsi was exposed as nothing better than Mubarak, and also it showed that the real enemy of the Arabs is the Zionist state and their backers, and that the Syria, Hezbollah in Iran were fundamental to the victory of the resistance in Gaza. And just like all the Arab armies were arrayed against Saddam back in the beginning of the 90s, similarly, now Ba'athist Syria can turn the whole situation around if it does only what Saddam Hussein did at that time, which was to launch a war of liberation against the Zionist state itself. The Scuds flew at Tel Aviv back in the early 90s. We saw the Fajr 5s from Iran, Hezbollah and Syria flying at Jerusalem and Tel Aviv last week. And it's this, if Syria can focus on this struggle, the Arab masses, the Muslim masses, and the masses of the global south will rally to its cause. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is a slow slide towards regime change in Syria, which is just an awful tragedy.
You talked about the launch of Scud missiles. Are you actually saying that these Patriot missiles will be used and actually be fired into Syria?
Well, they're deployed there. Well, what else is military hardware used, if not for either for military pressure?
Turkey's saying that they're using them. Obviously, they're saying they will need them to defend their citizens because some Turks have been killed already. Is Syria deliberately targeting Turkey?
No, of course, Syria is not. Syria has no interest, and actually Turkey has no interest to ratchet up things against Syria either, because Turkey, after Syria, which I've said before, is the #1 loser in this whole situation in Syria, because they're negatively impacted by the refugees. Erdogan is becoming less and less popular inside Turkey because of his Syria policies. So this is not at all in the interest of Syria and Turkey. This is NATO taking Turkey along into this disastrous mess. But NATO are clever, or they're clever because our side is stupid, because on the one hand they're using Turkey against Syria, but also they're weakening Turkey in relation to Syria as well, because the West are very clever. They know that although Turkey is an ally today, tomorrow it could be a regional power against the West, which it was before this whole Syria debacle, when Turkey had excellent relations with Syria, Iraq, Iran.
Sorry, you say the West is very clever, but has it really worked out what it'll do once Assad goes?
As Samar Amin, who's one of the best analysts of anti-imperialism in the global south from Egypt, has said, the West is only interested in destroying all Arab societies in order to create trauma, deep trauma within those societies, so it can facilitate the war and regime change operation against Iran successfully. This and only this is what the West is interested in right now in the Middle East, North African region.
Just a quick word about the threat of chemical weapons. That's been cited as another reason to deploy these Patriot missiles. Is that really a serious threat? Isn't the worry that, well, if there is a power vacuum, what happens to these alleged chemical weapons? That's the worry, isn't it?
Now, I'm glad you raised the issue about chemical weapons, because there's a few points to be made. One, this is an obvious war propaganda trick by the NATO powers to justify in the minds of the public that a bombing campaign should be conducted by NATO, at least a no-fly zone, against the Ba'athist Syrian government.
Okay.
But the second point is that I've been to Vietnam, to the orphanages and to the government support centers of those children affected by Agent Orange because of the US bombing of Vietnam. We know that what depleted uranium has done to Iraq in terms of the newborns' deformities. And Winston Churchill was the first leader of any power to use chemical weapons against who? Against what he called the savage tribes in Iraq in the early 1920s. So really putting some historical context to all of this.
Sukant, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for your thoughts. Sukant Chandan joining me live there in London.